They didn't care that elderly people would die. They wanted to prioritise a herd immunity plan above protecting everyone. And that was a plan that would protect the economy first. We're scared because the government isn't keeping us safe. And that's the minimum that we expect from our government, isn't it? To keep us safe. We don't have enough PPE. We don't have proper access to testing. So in Nottingham, we've only got 200 tests per day. That's the capacity. That's much, much less than what it needs to be. My mum is in the extremely vulnerable category, and of course I worry that I'm going to contract it and bring it back home to her. And that's the same for many of my colleagues. I decided to go back to care work part-time because I knew that my colleagues would be working in overdrive during the coronavirus pandemic, because that's what we already did. I wanted to be there to help them. The government's response to this crisis has reflected the decisions that they've made over the last decade, and that has been devaluing elderly, disabled and poor people's lives, valuing people as economic units only. I don't think it's surprising that, given that we've had a £7.7 billion cuts in social care since 2010, that we're not adequately prepared in social care for this pandemic. We were just about struggling to get the job done in ordinary times, let alone now. The government went through a run-through in 2016 to check whether we would be prepared for a pandemic if one hit. The answer was no. And when you've got a number 10 advisor saying a few elderly people will have to die, we just feel very let down. What Dominic Cummings was quoted as saying shows why the government was slow to lock down. They didn't care that elderly people would die. They wanted to prioritise a herd immunity plan above protecting everyone. And that was a plan that would protect the economy first, in the interests of big business first. This isn't the first time that the Tory party has shafted elderly people.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
In fact, anybody who isn't economically useful. They did it with the dementia tax. They've done it over the last decade with billions of cuts to social care. And this is just another example of the devaluing of elderly and disabled lives. I do think that there's a tendency not to see elderly people as proper people. That's just not the case. And I think there's a lot that I've learned working as a care worker about people's humanity and about the richness that they bring to the world. And far from seeing elderly people as hopeless and helpless, I think it's an immense privilege to be allowed into people's homes and to be able to facilitate them living full and independent lives. And I wish that the government would see elderly people in the same way. What's happening speaks for itself. Care homes are being left behind and forgotten. Weeks and weeks into lockdown, the government has finally announced they will include care home deaths and death in the community in statistics. I don't know whether they excluded the numbers in order to minimise the death toll, but that wouldn't be surprising given that we have a 30,000 death toll already, and that's disproportionately high compared to the rest of the globe, the worst in Europe, second only to the US and the world. I couldn't tell you the amount of care that we have for the residents we look after. We're the first line of defence, not just during a pandemic, but all the time. If we don't notice something, that could have really disastrous consequences. And my colleagues who do this full time and who've been doing this for decades and are extremely experienced and have been doing that for very little pay, even less recognition, what they have is like this, living hand to mouth. What they should have is like way up here. My heart feels full every time I go back to work and I'm with my colleagues. These are the people, they taught me how to do my job. They're retraining me now, because despite Priti Patel saying that this is a low-skilled job, it is not. I have had to retrain to do care work again in administering medication, moving and handling and hoisting people, in infection control and prevention, adult safeguarding. Priti Patel would have to train to do this job. And of course, she'd actually have to care, which is something that you can't train for. What this pandemic has shown is the need for a whole system change. There are cracks everywhere in the system. People are falling through them. We need a fully funded national care system that works alongside or within the NHS for the workers in it to be valued, respected and remunerated. We need PPE for all care workers, adequate PPE, because unless it's adequate, it doesn't function as being personal protective equipment. It's just a pair of gloves and an apron. We need a date from which we can expect to receive that. so we know when we're going to be safe. We need accessible testing to every worker who needs it. No more care workers having to travel from Leicester to Nottingham to receive a test. And we need proper sick pay for all workers so that people don't have to live on fresh air just in order to shield and to protect themselves and others. Of course, we've got to have hope. And we've got to keep hope for each other. But that doesn't mean having a toxic positivity and pretending that everything is okay, because it's not. We will hope and we will fight for it to get better, and we'll stick by each other throughout this period of lockdown and beyond. But we won't pretend that everything's fine. A big thanks to Double Down News for your exceptional journalism and critically minded analysis of the day's events, not just during coronavirus, but all the time. It's really important that news outlets that give the movement a voice are kept running. So please, if you can, donate to Double Down News on Patreon. Keep them going. Big up all of you.